Carl Jung's insights into the human psyche and the quest for life's purpose continue to captivate and challenge us to explore deeper layers of who we truly are. For Jung, life's purpose wasn't found in external success or societal achievements, but rather through a profound understanding of our inner worlds, particularly the darker, hidden parts of ourselves. In this exploration, the concept of the shadow stands out as a central theme in Jungian philosophy. Jung argued that it is only by acknowledging and integrating our shadow that we can access a more authentic existence, one that is deeply connected to our true purpose. Many of us are often swept up in the pursuit of success, constantly chasing external validation, whether it's through career accomplishments, financial success, or recognition from others. Yet, Jung suggested that the essence of life's purpose lies not in these outward goals, but in the internal work of understanding who we are at our deepest core. He believed that by facing the aspects of ourselves we typically avoid the repressed desires, hidden fears, and unresolved emotions, we can unlock a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling. This journey inward can seem daunting, especially since we often spend much of our lives avoiding or denying parts of ourselves that we deem undesirable or shameful. These parts, according to Jung, are what we call the shadow. The shadow represents the unconscious aspects of our personality that we fail to acknowledge, often because they conflict with our conscious identity or societal expectations. These hidden aspects of ourselves, whether they manifest as suppressed anger, jealousy, selfishness, or guilt, have the potential to shape our lives in profound ways if we choose to confront them rather than repress them. In the realm of Jungian psychology, the first step in discovering our life's purpose is self-realization. This process involves becoming deeply aware of both the conscious and unconscious parts of our psyche. Most people believe they know themselves, while they may be familiar with their traits, their strengths, and their weaknesses. However, Jung emphasized that to truly know oneself, we must go beyond surface-level awareness and engage in the often uncomfortable task of facing our darker, hidden qualities. At the heart of this process is the concept of shadow work, a term coined by Jung to describe the ongoing process of confronting the unconscious elements of the self. Shadow work is not about eliminating or judging these darker aspects, but about acknowledging and integrating them into our lives. This process, though difficult, can ultimately lead to a more harmonious and authentic life. One of the most powerful aspects of shadow work is the realization that the traits we tend to judge harshly in others are often reflections of the traits we ourselves repress. This phenomenon is known as projection. If we find ourselves frustrated or angered by someone else's behavior, it's often worth pausing and asking ourselves if we exhibit similar traits that we prefer not to acknowledge. This kind of self-reflection is a key component of shadow work, as it allows us to see our unconscious fears and desires reflected in the world around us. Through regular introspection, whether it's journaling, meditating, or simply reflecting on our thoughts and behaviors, we can begin to uncover the hidden aspects of ourselves. This isn't an easy process, and it requires a level of honesty and vulnerability that many are reluctant to embrace. But it is only through this raw self-examination that we can begin to understand who we truly are, including our unconscious motivations, desires, and fears. The more we integrate our shadow, the more we can embrace our full selves. This means accepting not just our positive traits, but also the parts of ourselves that we might have been ashamed of or tried to hide for years. Jung suggested that the shadow is not something to fear or repress, but something to work with. The goal is not to eradicate our darker traits, but to understand them, so that we can use them constructively in our lives. For example, feelings of anger, when understood and channeled appropriately, can serve as a powerful motivator for setting boundaries or standing up for ourselves. Similarly, envy can become a tool for self-reflection, prompting us to ask why we desire what others have and how we might go about fulfilling those desires in our own lives. Once we start acknowledging and integrating our shadow, we move closer to becoming a whole person, a concept Jung referred to as individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming our most authentic selves, not through perfection, but through the acceptance of all our complexities, contradictions, and flaws. It's about learning to live with and understand our darker aspects, rather than pretending they don't exist. The more we embrace our shadow, the more we can step into the fullness of who we are. And in doing so, we unlock our true life's purpose. But Jung also warned that this journey is not without its difficulties. Confronting the shadow can be an uncomfortable, sometimes painful process. As we uncover aspects of ourselves that we've spent years repressing, we may experience feelings of guilt, shame, or fear. These emotions can be overwhelming, but they are also a natural part of the self-realization process. The key is not to shy away from these feelings, but to sit with them, reflect on them, and understand what they are teaching us about ourselves. Many people attempt to avoid the darker aspects of their personality, believing that doing so will make them more good or virtuous. Yet, as Jung suggested, repressing these traits only gives them more power. Over time, repressed emotions can build up and eventually explode in unhealthy ways, often when we least expect it. It's not uncommon for someone who has spent years denying their anger or frustration to have an outburst when they reach a breaking point. Alternatively, those who ignore feelings of laziness or boredom may experience burnout when they eventually reach their limit. Jung argued that repression only makes these feelings stronger, and that only through facing and integrating them can we regain control. Once we have started the process of integration, the next step is to take action. Jung believed that the purpose of life is found not in idle thoughts, but in active engagement with the world. Understanding our dark side is crucial, but it must be followed by concrete action. We cannot simply reflect on our emotions and desires, we must act on them. In this sense, self-realization isn't just about becoming aware of who we are. It's about putting that awareness into practice. The idea of action as a path to meaning is one of the central tenets of Jungian philosophy. He argued that a person's life becomes meaningful not through passive reflection, but through the choices and actions they take. When we are actively engaged in the world, we align ourselves with our true purpose. But this doesn't mean we should simply react to external events. We must also take the initiative to create meaning in our lives. Whether it's through pursuing a career goal, building relationships, or contributing to society, the key to finding purpose is taking intentional action. For example, if someone wants to become a published author, they can't simply wait for inspiration to strike or hope that circumstances will align perfectly. They must take consistent action, writing regularly, seeking feedback, and actively pursuing publication opportunities. Similarly, if someone wants to make a difference in the world, they cannot wait for someone else to make the first move. They must take steps to create change, whether that's by starting a nonprofit, engaging in community work, or advocating for a cause they care about. The importance of action is especially evident when we face fear. Jung believed that fear is often the greatest barrier to taking action. When we encounter fear, we tend to avoid it, retreating back into the comfort of our shadow. But, Jung argued, it is precisely in the places where we feel fear that we can find our greatest opportunities for growth. Fear is not something to avoid, but something to confront head-on. By acknowledging our fears and preparing ourselves for the risks associated with them, we can move forward with courage and determination. Ultimately, Jung's message is that life's meaning is not found in external achievements or the avoidance of discomfort, but in the process of confronting our inner darkness and integrating it into our conscious lives. By doing so, we unlock a deeper, more authentic existence, one that is grounded in self-awareness, personal growth, and meaningful action. The journey to finding our purpose is not a quick or easy one. It requires introspection, self-acceptance, and the courage to face the parts of ourselves that we often want to hide. But as Jung reminds us, it is only through this process that we can find true meaning in our lives. It is through embracing our shadow, accepting our flaws, and taking intentional action that we can create a life that feels deeply meaningful and fulfilling. In the end, the purpose of life is not something that is handed to us from the outside. It is something that we must discover from within. By engaging in shadow work, embracing our fears, and taking action, we move closer to understanding who we truly are and what we are meant to contribute to the world. As we embrace the totality of ourselves, both light and dark, we unlock a life filled with purpose. authenticity, and meaning. Carl Jung's teachings on self-realization and the journey to uncovering one's deeper purpose remained profoundly impactful today, as they challenge us to dig beneath the surface of our lives and confront the parts of ourselves we would often prefer to ignore. At the core of his philosophy is the belief that real self-awareness goes far beyond simply understanding our visible strengths and weaknesses. It involves looking deep within, into the shadowy corners of our minds, and facing the unconscious elements of our psyche, the parts of us that we've repressed, hidden, or denied. It is only when we take the courageous step of facing these hidden aspects that we can begin to truly understand ourselves and unlock the deeper meaning of our lives. Jung's famous quote, "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes," is a clarion call to the world. It reminds us that true insight into who we are does not come from external sources, be it societal expectations, cultural norms, or even the achievements we strive for. These are fleeting. Instead, Jung points us inward, encouraging us to embark on a journey of introspection that leads to authentic self-discovery. To dream is to look outward, but to wake up, to truly awaken to our deeper purpose, we must first look inward and face the truths buried within us. The journey to self-realization, as Jung outlines, is not a superficial process of ticking off the boxes of personal growth, but an intense confrontation with the unconscious aspects of our being. Self-realization, as Jung defined it, is not simply about understanding our conscious thoughts or behaviors, but is a much deeper, more complex process of coming to terms with the layers of our personality that we often suppress or deny. It is about becoming aware of the parts of ourselves we've hidden, either because they don't align with our ideal self-image or because society has taught us to reject them. These hidden aspects, according to Jung, form what he called the shadow. The shadow is a psychological concept that refers to the unconscious, repressed parts of our psyche, those traits, emotions, desires, and impulses we choose not to acknowledge because they don't fit into the version of ourselves that we present to the world. The shadow contains everything from small, everyday flaws to more profound emotional wounds. And while it might be uncomfortable to acknowledge, it holds the key to a more authentic and complete sense of self. The shadow can manifest in many forms, traits like anger, jealousy, fear, laziness, or even guilt about things we did or didn't do in our past. These are not necessarily traits we are unaware of altogether. In fact, many of us are conscious of these feelings or impulses. However, because they don't align with the image we want to project, whether to ourselves or others, we suppress them, ignoring their influence on our lives. We may feel anger toward a colleague for no apparent reason, but will often brush it off as an isolated incident. We might carry deep, simmering jealousy when a friend achieves something significant, but tell ourselves it's just the pressure of the moment, that we should be happy for them. In these instances, the shadow is at play. The feelings are present, but we try to ignore or downplay them, creating a false sense of who we truly are. Jung's assertion that real self-awareness arises when we can confront these hidden aspects of ourselves is powerful, because it forces us to reckon with the truth that our unconscious holds far more influence over our actions than we might care to admit. In fact, one could argue that many of the challenges we face in life stem from our failure to recognize and integrate these repressed parts of ourselves. When we refuse to acknowledge our shadow, it doesn't simply disappear, it festers in the background, influencing our behaviors and reactions in ways we don't always understand. It is in these moments, when our emotional reactions feel disproportionate or puzzling, that the shadow is often at play. For example, consider a situation where someone feels an overwhelming sense of resentment when a close friend receives recognition for an achievement. They might not consciously identify themselves as a jealous person, but upon closer inspection, they realize that the jealousy they feel is not just a passing emotion, but something deeper. The feeling may arise not because of the friend's success, but because it mirrors something within themselves, their own unfulfilled desires or insecurity about their own lack of progress. By refusing to confront and understand this emotion, they remain trapped in a cycle of suppressed feelings that only continue to hinder their personal growth. It is precisely this kind of unexamined emotional reaction that Jung encourages us to look at. Through practices like journaling, meditation, and deep introspection, we can begin to bring our shadow into the light of consciousness. It is through such acts of self-reflection that we start to recognize the hidden parts of ourselves and, crucially, accept them for what they are. Self-awareness does not mean rejecting or eliminating these traits, but rather understanding them, embracing their role in our lives, and learning how to work with them. Consider the example of jealousy again. Rather than shaming oneself for feeling envious, self-realization requires us to ask, why do I feel this way? Is it because I feel insecure about my own achievements? Is it a reflection of unfulfilled desires or unrealized dreams? By acknowledging the root cause of these feelings, we can begin to understand ourselves better and gain insight into the things we truly want in life. The key, according to Jung, is not to repress these emotions, but to integrate them into our conscious experience. Only by doing so can we begin to access a deeper level of self-understanding and move closer to discovering our true purpose. In a sense, the process of self-realization is like peeling back layers of an onion. As we strip away the defenses we've built around ourselves and confront our unconscious tendencies, we reveal the core of our true being, the parts of us that have always been there but remained hidden behind layers of shame, fear, or societal conditioning. But this journey is not easy. It requires courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to face discomfort. It involves not only recognizing our weaknesses and flaws, but also coming to terms with the painful truths about our past experiences, our wounds, and the ways in which they have shaped our present behavior. One of the biggest challenges in the process of self-realization is the resistance we often feel toward facing our shadow. It's much easier to pretend that everything is fine, that we don't have unresolved anger, fear, or guilt. We live in a culture that often values the appearance of success and happiness over the authenticity of one's internal life. This cultural emphasis on perfection creates a barrier to self-awareness, making it difficult to acknowledge our deeper, darker aspects. Yet, Jung insists that these aspects are not our enemies but our teachers. When we stop running from our fears and begin to understand them, we can use them as powerful tools for personal growth. Furthermore, the integration of the shadow doesn't just bring personal insight, it also has the potential to radically improve our relationships and interactions with others. When we understand our own jealousy, anger, or insecurity, we are better equipped to empathize with others when they experience similar emotions. We become more compassionate and less judgmental, recognizing that everyone carries their own shadows, and that much of the conflict in our lives arises from people's inability or unwillingness to face their own inner darkness. Through the practice of self-reflection and self-acceptance, we can start to shed the masks we've worn for years, revealing the raw, unpolished version of ourselves. This version of ourselves, although imperfect, is far more authentic and connected to our true purpose than any idealized version we might create. In embracing both the light and dark aspects of who we are, we open ourselves up to living a life of greater meaning and fulfillment. The path to self-realization is not a quick fix or an easy road, it's a lifelong process. It requires ongoing introspection, patience, and a willingness to look at ourselves with honesty and compassion. But the rewards of this journey are immense. Through self-realization, we uncover our deeper desires, confront our fears, and integrate the parts of ourselves that we have long ignored. We come to understand not just who we are, but why we are, and, ultimately, how we can live a life that is aligned with our true purpose. This process of self-realization is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a deeply emotional and spiritual journey that requires a shift in how we approach life itself. It's about moving beyond external validation, beyond the pressures and expectations placed on us by others, and looking inward to find the answers we have always been seeking. In the end, it is through this inward journey that we come to truly awaken, not just to the external world, but to the very core of our being, the part of us that holds the key to our deepest purpose in life. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow is one of the most compelling and transformative aspects of his psychological theory. The shadow, according to Jung, consists of all the unconscious parts of ourselves that we tend to ignore, repress, or deny because they don't fit with the image we've cultivated of ourselves or the image that society expects us to uphold. These aspects can range from traits we deem negative, like anger or jealousy, to qualities we've simply outgrown, but still continue to influence our behavior. Engaging in what is known as shadow work, consciously confronting and integrating these hidden parts of our psyche, is one of the most profound ways to unlock deeper self-awareness, healing, and personal growth. It is through this process that we can not only become more authentic, but also live a life aligned with our true purpose. However, one of the central aspects of Jung's teaching on the shadow is the distinction between acknowledging its presence and identifying with it. Jung emphasized that getting to know your shadow does not mean you should define yourself by its contents. For instance, if your shadow contains anger, this does not mean you are an angry person. Instead, it means that anger is a part of you, an emotion that, when understood and channeled in healthy ways, can offer powerful insights into your deeper needs and desires. By acknowledging that these darker aspects exist, we give ourselves permission to engage with them consciously, rather than allowing them to control our behavior in unconscious ways. This process of shadow work can be both uncomfortable and enlightening. It requires a willingness to look at the parts of ourselves that we might have long ignored or rejected. But the rewards are immense. As we face these aspects of ourselves, we begin to understand not only our behavior, but also the root causes of our emotional responses and internal conflicts. By doing so, we also become more compassionate towards others, recognizing that everyone carries their own shadow and that the judgments we make about others often reflect unexamined parts of ourselves. A key concept in Jungian philosophy related to shadow work is that of projection. Projection occurs when we attribute aspects of our own psyche, especially those parts we have rejected or repressed, to others. We often criticize or judge people harshly for traits that we, ourselves, possess but have not acknowledged. This phenomenon is not merely a matter of seeing faults in others. Rather, it is a psychological defense mechanism that deflects our own discomfort with our own hidden traits. For example, if we find ourselves criticizing a friend for being selfish, it may not be that the friend is selfish, but rather that we harbor selfish tendencies within ourselves, tendencies we've been unwilling to accept. In this way, the judgment we direct at others is actually a reflection of our own unexamined shadow. A personal example of projection might involve someone who is highly critical of others' laziness. This person may frequently boast about their own hard work and productivity, using these traits as a badge of honor. They might talk about how hard they push themselves to achieve and how lazy others are in comparison. However, the truth may be more complex. The person might have deep, underlying insecurities about their own worth and fear being perceived as lazy or unproductive. Their drive to constantly prove themselves might be rooted in an internal fear of inadequacy or judgment from others. This fear of being lazy, perhaps instilled in childhood or influenced by societal pressures, drives them to overcompensate by overworking themselves. At the same time, they project their fear onto others, harshly judging those who don't share the same frantic pace. Through shadow work, this person might begin to realize that their critical attitude toward others' laziness is not so much about others as it is about their own internal conflict. They may come to recognize that their overemphasis on productivity is a defense against feelings of insecurity or self-doubt. Once they acknowledge these feelings, they can begin to unpack where they come from and whether they truly align with their authentic values. Perhaps, in time, they'll recognize that it's okay to rest and take breaks without fearing that they are lazy or inadequate. They might even come to appreciate moments of stillness, allowing themselves to recharge and reclaim their self-worth independent of their external achievements. The act of questioning such automatic judgments and projections is where the process of integrating the shadow begins. Instead of dismissing or repressing these feelings, individuals who engage in shadow work learn to examine their projections and ask themselves why they feel the need to judge others in a particular way. This leads to greater self-awareness and a deeper understanding of the emotions and fears that underlie their behavior. It's through this kind of introspection that we start to integrate the shadow, allowing it to become a source of wisdom rather than a source of conflict. As we engage in shadow work, we begin to realize that the traits we once viewed as flaws or weaknesses are often just parts of us that we haven't fully understood or embraced. By integrating these aspects into our consciousness, we not only make them less likely to control our behavior unconsciously, but we also gain access to the deeper resources they offer. For instance, anger, when acknowledged and understood, can be a powerful motivator for change or a signal that boundaries need to be set. Fear can reveal areas where we need growth or healing. Even jealousy, which is often viewed as a destructive emotion, can highlight unmet needs or desires that, when explored, lead to greater self-discovery. Shadow work is not a quick or easy fix. It is an ongoing, lifelong process. It requires us to continue looking inward and questioning our automatic responses to the world around us. Every judgment we make about others, every emotional reaction that feels exaggerated or disproportionate, can be an invitation to look deeper into ourselves. Each of these moments offers an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. But as we do this work, we find that our emotional responses become more measured and less reactive. We are able to interact with the world in a more conscious way, free from the unconscious baggage of unresolved emotions. Moreover, embracing the shadow doesn't mean accepting every aspect of it blindly. Just because we recognize a particular emotion or trait within us doesn't mean we have to indulge it or let it dictate our actions. The goal of shadow work is not to indulge in our darker impulses, but to understand them. By doing so, we gain the ability to respond to them in ways that align with our true values and the kind of person we wish to be. We are empowered not by the suppression of these traits, but by their conscious integration into our lives. One of the most profound aspects of shadow work is that it leads to greater self-acceptance. As we confront the parts of ourselves that we have previously rejected, we come to realize that these parts are just as much a part of our humanity as our more socially acceptable traits. By accepting our flaws and imperfections, we free ourselves from the need to project them onto others. We stop seeing the world as full of people who are better or worse than us, and instead, we start to see the shared humanity in everyone. We understand that everyone has their own shadow, and just as we work to integrate ours, we can approach others with greater compassion and understanding. This process of self-acceptance is incredibly liberating. When we stop fighting against the darker parts of ourselves, we stop living in a constant state of internal conflict. We become more at peace with who we are. And from that place of peace, we are better able to move forward in life with authenticity and purpose. Shadow work, in this sense, is not about becoming perfect or eliminating negative traits. It is about becoming whole, about accepting all parts of ourselves, even those we might have once viewed as unworthy or unlovable. Ultimately, the integration of the shadow is what allows us to live a more authentic, meaningful life. As we recognize and embrace the unconscious aspects of ourselves, we become more connected to our true nature. We stop living in reaction to our fears and insecurities, and instead, we begin to live according to our own inner compass. We understand ourselves more deeply, and as a result, we relate to others in a more compassionate and empathetic way. The shadow, once a source of shame and repression, becomes a source of wisdom and strength. It is only through this process of embracing the shadow, of integrating all the hidden parts of ourselves, that we can truly live a life that reflects our deepest truth and purpose. The journey of self-awareness is neither easy nor linear, but it holds the promise of profound transformation. At the heart of this process, particularly in the teachings of Carl Jung, lies the understanding of the shadow, the unconscious, often repressed aspects of ourselves that we tend to shy away from. Once we acknowledge the existence of our shadow, the next step is integration, embracing these darker facets of our personality and turning them into sources of strength and personal growth. This integration is crucial because it is only through accepting and making peace with the parts of ourselves that we have rejected that we can truly move forward on the path toward wholeness. Jungian philosophy offers a radically different approach to personal development from what we are often taught in mainstream culture. Most of us are conditioned to believe that the key to a fulfilling life is to focus solely on our strengths and to suppress or ignore our perceived weaknesses. We're told to constantly strive to be our best selves, which often leads to the repression of those parts of us that we think aren't good enough. But Jung's ideas flip this narrative on its head. According to him, true wholeness doesn't come from denying these darker aspects. It comes from embracing them, integrating them into our conscious awareness, and then finding healthy ways to channel them. Integration, in this sense, does not mean simply giving in to every impulse that arises. It's not about acting out every feeling or emotion impulsively. Instead, it's about acknowledging those feelings and using them as tools for constructive change. Take the example of anger, which is one of the most commonly repressed emotions. Many people believe that anger is something inherently bad and try to push it away whenever it arises. But anger, when channeled in healthy ways, can be an incredibly powerful force. Instead of suppressing it, Jung encouraged people to recognize it, sit with it, and then find ways to use it productively. For example, let's consider a person who tends to feel angry in certain situations, perhaps when they feel disrespected or when their boundaries are crossed. If they were to suppress this anger, they might end up feeling resentful or even passive-aggressive. On the other hand, if they were to allow their anger to take control impulsively, they might lash out and damage relationships or make regrettable decisions. The key, according to Jung, is not to deny the anger, but to learn how to express it constructively. This could mean using that anger as motivation to assert yourself, set boundaries, or stand up for what you believe in. It's not about acting out in an uncontrolled manner. Rather, it's about recognizing that anger is a valid emotional response and using it to advocate for yourself in situations where you might otherwise remain silent or passive. The process of integration also involves looking at other repressed emotions or traits that we might not be proud of. Take, for example, jealousy. Many people experience feelings of jealousy but dismiss them as shameful or unworthy. Instead of acknowledging this emotion, they may suppress it, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy, resentment, or self-loathing. However, Jung believed that jealousy, like anger, can serve as a valuable signal. It can point to unmet desires or areas of your life where you feel unfulfilled or insecure. When you take the time to explore these feelings, rather than hide them, you begin to learn what you truly want or need from life. Perhaps you're jealous of a colleague's success because you long for recognition in your own career. Or perhaps you feel jealous in relationships because you fear being abandoned. Understanding the root of these feelings can help you address the deeper insecurities that are driving them. Through this process of accepting and integrating our shadow traits, we begin to see ourselves more clearly. We realize that we are complex beings, filled with a range of emotions and tendencies, some of which we may have previously judged as undesirable or unworthy. But rather than viewing these parts of ourselves as flaws, we learn to see them as opportunities for growth. Each repressed emotion or trait becomes a doorway to deeper self-awareness and greater authenticity. Instead of living in a state of denial or self-criticism, we learn to embrace the full spectrum of who we are. And in doing so, we create space for real transformation. This acceptance of our shadow self leads to a greater sense of balance. When we stop fighting against the parts of ourselves that we don't like, we free ourselves from the internal struggle that often keeps us stuck in patterns of frustration and self-doubt. When we accept ourselves' flaws and all, we no longer need to seek validation from others or try to fit into molds that don't align with who we truly are. Instead, we start to live from a place of internal peace, which makes it easier to align our actions and decisions with our true values. One of the most powerful outcomes of integrating the shadow is that it allows us to live more authentically. As we become more in touch with our true selves, we begin to make choices that reflect our own values and desires. Rather than simply following the expectations of others, we start to understand what we really want from life and can then take the necessary steps to create that reality. This alignment with our authentic self gives us a sense of purpose and direction that cannot be found through external achievements alone. It's not about striving for approval or trying to conform to external ideals. It's about creating a life that feels true to who we are at our core. The integration of the shadow is also a deeply personal process. and it often involves confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves. This can be difficult, especially if we've spent years denying certain aspects of our personality. But the reward is worth it. As we confront these aspects head-on, we gradually free ourselves from the grip of self-judgment and shame. We stop seeing ourselves as flawed or inadequate, and instead start to see ourselves as whole, capable of both light and dark, strength and vulnerability. This self-acceptance is a deeply liberating experience, one that allows us to live with greater confidence and ease. Importantly, self-acceptance doesn't mean resigning ourselves to unhelpful behaviors or toxic traits. Accepting that you have anger, jealousy, or fear doesn't mean giving those emotions free rein. Instead, it means recognizing them and using them as signals that can guide us toward healthier ways of behaving and interacting with the world. It's about being honest with ourselves about where we need to grow, and using that insight as motivation to make positive changes. When we accept ourselves as we are, we create the space for growth and transformation to happen naturally. We stop trying to force ourselves into a mold and instead let the process of self-acceptance unfold organically. For example, a person who struggles with chronic self-doubt might start by accepting that they feel this way, rather than denying it or trying to pretend that everything is fine. Instead of suppressing the feeling, they might ask themselves where this doubt is coming from and what it has to teach them. Perhaps they feel inadequate because they've been comparing themselves to others, or maybe their self-doubt stems from past experiences of failure or rejection. By acknowledging this emotion and looking at its roots, they can begin to work through it in a healthy way. Instead of letting self-doubt control them, they can use it as a prompt to reflect on their strengths, values, and past successes. This recognition allows them to gradually overcome the self-doubt and move forward with greater self-assurance. Ultimately, integrating the shadow and embracing self-acceptance is a process of self-liberation. It allows us to shed the false narratives we've built about who we are and begin living in alignment with our true selves. As we accept our flaws and strengths alike, we stop judging ourselves based on external standards and start living authentically. This authenticity is the key to living a life that feels meaningful and purposeful. The more we learn to embrace all aspects of ourselves, the more at peace we become with who we are, and this peace radiates outward, affecting every area of our lives. We stop trying to be something we're not, and instead, we become more fully who we truly are. And in doing so, we unlock the full potential for growth, creativity, and joy that lies within us. Carl Jung's assertion that you are what you do, not what you say you'll do, offers a profound insight into the essence of human purpose and meaning. Too often, we find ourselves caught up in the allure of intention, convinced that the mere act of planning or dreaming is enough to manifest change in our lives. But Jung challenges this notion, reminding us that it is not what we say we'll do, but rather what we actually do that defines our lives. The journey toward a meaningful existence doesn't start with lofty ideals or vague resolutions. It begins with action, real, tangible steps taken with purpose and intent. This philosophy stands in stark contrast to the modern tendency to live reactively, where we let life unfold around us, waiting for opportunities to come to us, or hoping that the circumstances will align perfectly before we take any significant steps. Jung encouraged a far more active approach, one in which we take the reins of our own destiny, shape our own futures, and create meaning by engaging with the world around us. The power of proactive action lies in its ability to transform our intentions into reality, turning abstract desires into concrete accomplishments. Understanding the importance of action starts by reflecting on the nature of life itself. Life is dynamic, unpredictable, and constantly evolving. We do not live in a vacuum, and the world around us is in a constant state of flux. To live authentically and with purpose, we must engage with this ever-changing environment, embracing both its challenges and opportunities. It's not enough to simply wait for meaning to reveal itself. We must go out and create it. Jung's philosophy encourages us to take risks, to venture outside of our comfort zones, and to engage with the world in a way that is proactive rather than reactive. In doing so, we shape our own lives, rather than letting life shape us. One of the first steps in this process is to confront the reality that life requires effort. It's easy to get lost in the dream of what could be, but dreams alone do not bring about meaningful change. Whether we desire to build a successful career, create a meaningful relationship, or embark on a personal creative project, it is the actions we take that make all the difference. Jung's belief in the power of action is a reminder that we cannot wait for life to happen to us. We must make it happen ourselves. Take, for instance, the example of someone who dreams of becoming an author. Writing a book is a goal many people hold dear, but it's a goal that remains elusive for most. The reason? Often, it's not a lack of talent or ambition, but a failure to take action. Writing a book requires more than just the desire to do so. It demands consistent effort, focus, and discipline. Too often, aspiring writers fall prey to the belief that inspiration will strike at the perfect moment, or that the conditions will somehow magically align for them to start. The truth is, the perfect moment never comes. It's only through regular, committed action, writing every day, seeking feedback, refining the craft, that an author eventually reaches their goal. This story is not limited to writing. Of course, it applies to virtually any goal or aspiration we have in life. Whether it's building a business, learning a new skill, or improving our health, the same principle applies. Action is the key to transformation. We cannot sit idly by and wait for things to change. We must take the initiative and shape the course of our lives. Jung's philosophy asks us to move beyond the limitations of inaction and complacency, to step out into the world and make things happen, even when the path ahead seems unclear. At the core of this is the understanding that life's true meaning is found not in the destination, but in the process, the journey of striving, learning, and growing. Jung emphasized the importance of the journey itself, rather than focusing solely on the end result. The process of working toward a goal, of facing challenges and overcoming obstacles, is where we find meaning and purpose. It is through this ongoing engagement with the world that we learn, evolve, and become more attuned to our authentic selves. The act of creation, whether it's through writing, building, or simply living in a way that aligns with our values, becomes a reflection of our inner world and a means of expressing who we are. This idea is crucial to understanding the relationship between action and self-realization. When we take proactive steps toward our goals, we don't just move closer to achieving them, we also move closer to understanding who we are. Through action, we discover our strengths and weaknesses, our passions and fears. Every step we take toward our aspirations is also a step toward a deeper understanding of ourselves. In this way, action becomes a mirror for self-awareness, allowing us to refine our sense of purpose and align our external efforts with our internal truth. The key to making action meaningful lies in aligning it with our true values and purpose. When we act without clarity or purpose, our actions can feel aimless and unfulfilling. But when our actions are guided by a sense of meaning, when we know why we're doing what we're doing, those actions become powerful and transformative. Jung believed that meaning is not something that is found passively, but something that is created actively through engagement with the world. By acting in accordance with our authentic selves, we bring meaning into our lives. This doesn't mean that every action will be a grand success, or that the journey will always be easy. There will be setbacks, mistakes, and moments of doubt, but it is precisely through these experiences that we learn and grow. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is an essential part of the process. Every misstep, every obstacle, becomes an opportunity to refine our approach and deepen our understanding of what truly matters. It is through this process of trial and error, of striving and learning, that we ultimately create meaning in our lives. Jung's insistence on the importance of action also challenges the modern mindset that often equates meaning with achievement or success. In our achievement-driven culture, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that meaning is found only in the end result. But for Jung, the journey, the process of working toward a goal, of engaging with the world and actively creating, was where meaning truly resided. The end result is secondary to the internal growth and transformation that happens along the way. Moreover, by taking action, we connect more deeply with the world around us. We engage with our communities, share our work, and contribute to something larger than ourselves. This engagement not only creates meaning for us personally, but also for the people and world we interact with. It's through our actions that we leave our mark on the world, that we create impact and build relationships, and that we contribute to the collective good. Jung's idea that you are what you do underscores the power of action as a transformative force. It's not enough to dream or to think about what we want to accomplish. We must act. By doing so, we shape not only our own lives, but also the world around us. Each action we take is a step toward realizing our potential, a step toward living a life of purpose and meaning. The journey of creating meaning in life through action is ultimately about finding alignment between who we are and what we do. When our actions are a true reflection of our inner values and desires, we experience a sense of fulfillment and authenticity. The process itself, full of challenges, triumphs, and lessons, becomes the source of deep meaning. And through this engagement, we find our way to a life that feels both purposeful and authentic. Jung's teachings remind us that we are not passive observers of our lives. We are active creators of meaning, and it is through our actions that we bring our true selves to the world. Carl Jung, one of the most profound thinkers in the history of psychology, offered us a powerful perspective on fear and its role in the journey of self-realization and living a meaningful life. He proposed a relationship between fear and purpose that many people are hesitant to fully acknowledge. According to Jung, the very fears we try to avoid or run from may, in fact, hold the key to unlocking the deepest parts of ourselves, the places where our true potential lies. In other words, where we find fear, we find our task the challenge that can lead to personal growth, transformation, and a life imbued with meaning. At first glance, this might sound counterintuitive. After all, fear is often seen as something negative, something to be avoided or escaped. In fact, many of us go to great lengths to avoid fear, whether it's the fear of failure, rejection, embarrassment, or even the fear of success. These fears often keep us stuck in place, preventing us from taking risks, making changes, or stepping out of our comfort zones. But Jung's message is clear: fear, when faced head-on, is not an obstacle but a guide. It is not something to suppress or deny, but something to engage with. Fear is natural, and rather than run from it, we should learn to face it, embrace it, and use it as a catalyst for deeper understanding and growth. The key to understanding Jung's perspective on fear is recognizing that fear is not inherently bad. It is, in many ways, a reflection of our inner self, our subconscious mind alerting us to areas where we may need to grow or where we feel vulnerable. When we experience fear, it is often because we are standing at the edge of something new or unknown. Fear signals that we are on the precipice of change, and change can be uncomfortable, challenging, and uncertain. But it is through this discomfort that we often discover the truest parts of ourselves. Fear is, in essence, a signal that we are about to step into uncharted territory where our true potential lies, and where we will be forced to confront and integrate parts of ourselves we may have long ignored or denied. Jung believed that fear, if acknowledged and confronted, can lead to profound personal transformation. It is precisely when we lean into our fear, rather than run from it, that we begin to unlock the doors to self-discovery and growth. Rather than being paralyzed by fear, we can choose to use it as a powerful tool for change. Fear, in this sense, is not a force to be overcome but an invitation to explore deeper truths about ourselves and our place in the world. One of the most common forms of fear is the fear of failure. Many people, particularly those who are striving for personal or professional success, are paralyzed by this fear. The thought of failing, of not living up to expectations, of falling short of goals can be so overwhelming that it prevents people from even starting. It's easy to become trapped in a cycle of what-ifs and maybes, where the fear of not succeeding outweighs the possibility of trying. But as Jung would argue, this fear itself may point to what we need to do. The fear of failure often arises when we are on the verge of stepping into something that matters to us deeply, something that will push us beyond our comfort zone and challenge our perceptions of ourselves. It is in facing this fear that we may discover what we are truly capable of, and in the process, we may redefine success on our own terms. Consider the example of someone who wants to start their own business but is terrified of failing. The fear of financial loss, rejection from potential customers, or the embarrassment of not succeeding may paralyze them into inaction. But if they allow themselves to acknowledge this fear rather than suppress it, they begin to see it for what it really is, a natural response to the uncertainty of entrepreneurship, and one that can be managed. By preparing for the worst-case scenarios, understanding the possibility of setbacks, building resilience, and creating a backup plan, they can take measured actions toward their goal. Rather than being immobilized by fear, they can use it to fuel their efforts, knowing that failure is not the end but a part of the process of growth and learning. Confronting the fear of failure in this way can lead to greater confidence and a deeper understanding of what it takes to succeed. Fear of rejection is another common fear that can hold people back, whether it's the fear of rejection in relationships, in the workplace, or in creative endeavors. The fear of not being accepted can be a significant barrier to pursuing one's true path. Jung believed that our fears often arise from our projections, the unconscious beliefs and assumptions we hold about ourselves. For example, if someone fears rejection, it may be because they have internalized the belief that they are not worthy of love, success, or recognition. This fear, while real, is often based on false assumptions about our worth or abilities. In confronting this fear, we are forced to confront the beliefs we hold about ourselves, and this process can lead to a profound shift in self-awareness. The act of facing rejection, whether it's in the form of a failed relationship or a lost opportunity, becomes an opportunity to reevaluate our self-worth and challenge the beliefs that have held us back. Through this process, we learn to accept ourselves more fully and find strength in the face of adversity. Another powerful aspect of fear is the fear of embarrassment or shame. The fear of being judged by others, of making a fool of oneself, or of revealing vulnerabilities is something many people experience. This fear often prevents us from expressing ourselves authentically or from taking risks that might expose us to criticism. But Jung's philosophy suggests that it is precisely in these moments of vulnerability that we have the greatest opportunity for growth. When we embrace the fear of embarrassment or shame, we are invited to step into our own authenticity and to accept that making mistakes and being imperfect is a natural part of the human experience. By facing our fears in these moments, we break free from the need for external validation and learn to trust ourselves more deeply. Jung's perspective on fear is also rooted in his understanding of the unconscious mind. He believed that much of our fear stems from the unconscious aspects of ourselves, the parts of our psyche that we have repressed or denied. These repressed aspects often manifest as fear because they represent parts of us that we have not fully integrated or accepted. Jung referred to this process of confronting the unconscious as shadow work. The shadow is made up of the parts of ourselves that we have rejected or suppressed, whether it's anger, jealousy, insecurity, or other emotions we deem unacceptable. These aspects of the self can often be the source of our fears, as we are afraid to confront the parts of ourselves that we perceive as bad or weak. But it is through embracing the shadow, by acknowledging and integrating these rejected aspects, that we achieve wholeness and healing. Fear, in this context, becomes a doorway to the unconscious, a guide that points us to the areas of our psyche that need attention and healing. The process of facing and embracing fear is not an easy one. It requires courage, self-awareness, and the willingness to step into the unknown. But it is also a process that leads to profound transformation. As we confront our fears, we begin to break down the walls that separate us from our true selves. We stop hiding behind facades of perfection or success, and instead, we allow ourselves to be fully present in the moment, with all our imperfections and vulnerabilities. In doing so, we open ourselves up to a deeper connection with our own humanity and with the world around us. Jung believed that the task of each person is to confront their own fears and limitations in order to achieve self-realization and a life of meaning. By embracing our fears, we move closer to understanding our true purpose, and in the process, we unlock the potential for a more authentic and fulfilling existence. Fear, when viewed through this lens, is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, a catalyst for change, growth, and self-discovery. It is in facing our fears that we discover what we are truly capable of. And it is through this journey of self-confrontation that we ultimately find the meaning and purpose we seek in life. Carl Jung, one of the most influential figures in the field of psychology, presented a philosophy of life that continues to resonate deeply with many people today. His ideas about the nature of the self, the unconscious mind, and the path to self-realization challenge us to reconsider how we approach meaning and purpose in our lives. For Jung, the key to living a meaningful life doesn't lie in external accomplishments, societal validation, or the pursuit of superficial success. Instead, it lies in an internal journey, one where we confront and embrace the hidden parts of ourselves, acknowledge our fears and vulnerabilities, and take proactive steps toward becoming more authentic and whole. At the heart of Jung's philosophy is the concept of the shadow, a term he used to describe the unconscious aspects of our personality that we repress, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. These are the parts of ourselves that we often fear or view as undesirable: our anger, jealousy, insecurities, selfishness, and so on. Jung believed that our shadow is not just a collection of negative traits, but also the key to understanding our deepest potential. He argued that the meaning of life is not found by running away from these darker aspects of ourselves, but by confronting them and integrating them into our consciousness. By doing so, we unlock the full range of who we are and gain access to the depths of our being that often remain hidden from view. When we first encounter this idea, it can feel daunting. Most of us would rather avoid confronting the parts of ourselves that we don't like, whether it's the anger that simmers just below the surface, the feelings of inadequacy that plague us, or the jealousy we feel in the face of others' successes. We often go to great lengths to suppress these emotions and traits, hoping they will go away on their own. But Jung's philosophy tells us that this avoidance only leads to further fragmentation of the self. The more we repress the shadow, the more power it has over us, often in ways we don't fully understand. The goal, then, is not to eliminate or deny the shadow, but to confront it, accept it, and integrate it into our lives. Embracing our darkness is, in many ways, a radical act of self-acceptance. It means acknowledging that we are complex beings, capable of both light and shadow, rather than seeing ourselves as inherently flawed or bad because of these darker traits. We begin to see them as part of the human experience. Our anger, our jealousy, our fear, they are not separate from us. They are a part of our makeup. And when we accept them as such, we stop living in fear of them. Instead of repressing them or allowing them to control us, we can learn to manage them, channel them, and use them in ways that serve our greater good. This process of self-integration, of accepting the shadow, is not easy. It requires courage, introspection, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths about ourselves. It is a journey that can be filled with discomfort, confusion, and even pain. But as Jung emphasized, the only way to truly know ourselves is to look within. We cannot expect to find purpose and meaning in life if we are unwilling to look at the full spectrum of our being. If we are unwilling to confront the parts of ourselves that we wish to ignore. The path to self-realization, according to Jung, is not a passive one. It requires action. After acknowledging the shadow, the next step is integration, which is an active process. Integration means taking those once rejected aspects of ourselves and learning to use them constructively. For example, if we have spent years repressing anger, integration might mean learning to recognize when we are angry, understanding where that anger comes from, and then finding ways to express it healthfully and productively. It doesn't mean acting out impulsively or allowing the anger to control us, but rather using the energy behind that emotion to create boundaries, advocate for ourselves, or take action where needed. In this way, embracing the shadow doesn't mean indulging in our darker tendencies. Instead, it's about understanding them, accepting them, and learning how to harness their energy for growth. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to make it a conscious part of our lives, allowing us to live with greater awareness and authenticity. As we integrate our shadows, we become more whole, more aligned with our true selves, and more capable of creating lives filled with meaning and purpose. Of course, The journey of self-realization does not end with the integration of the shadow. Once we begin to accept our darkness, the next step is to take proactive action. As Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." Purpose in life is not something that comes from idle thoughts or passive wishing. It is something we must actively create. We must be willing to step out of our comfort zones, to take risks, to face our fears, and to act on what we know to be true about ourselves. Purpose is not a static destination. It is something we create through the choices we make and the actions we take every day. This is where fear comes into play. Fear is a natural part of the process of growth and self-discovery. Jung argued that where you find fear, you often find your task, your calling, the very thing that will help you grow and become more fully yourself. Fear is not something to avoid. It is something to embrace. Fear is a sign that we are standing on the edge of something new, something transformative. The more we can lean into our fear rather than shy away from it, the more we allow ourselves to move forward on our path towards self-realization. Taking action in the face of fear is essential to living a life of purpose. It is not enough to simply reflect on our shadow, accept it, and understand it. We must also do something with that understanding. If we want to become writers, artists, entrepreneurs, or anything else, we must take concrete steps toward our goals. This might mean writing every day, even when we don't feel inspired, or reaching out to mentors, colleagues, or potential clients, even when we're terrified of rejection. It might mean starting a business, despite the fear of failure, or pursuing a creative project, even when we're uncertain of the outcome. The process is not about waiting for the perfect moment or waiting for everything to fall into place. It's about taking action, no matter how small, and trusting that the act of doing will move us closer to our purpose. Jung also emphasized the importance of self-acceptance in this process. In order to take meaningful action, we must first accept who we are, both the light and the dark. We cannot act with integrity and authenticity if we are at war with ourselves. Accepting our shadow, acknowledging our fears, and understanding our true nature allows us to move through the world with greater clarity and confidence. When we accept ourselves fully, we become less concerned with the judgments of others and more focused on living in alignment with our true calling. As we embark on the journey of self-discovery, it's important to remember that it is not always a smooth or linear path. There will be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt, but these are not signs that we should give up or turn back. They are simply part of the process. Life's greatest lessons often come from hardship and struggle, and it is in these moments that we are called to dig deeper, to face our fears head-on, and to continue moving forward. The most meaningful lives are not those that are free of adversity, but those in which individuals have faced their darkness, embraced their fears, and moved through the world with courage and authenticity. In conclusion, Carl Jung's philosophy offers us a powerful roadmap for living a life of meaning and purpose. By embracing our darkness, confronting our fears, and taking proactive action, we create lives that are not only authentic, but also rich with purpose. The path to self-realization is not easy, but it is the only path that leads to true fulfillment. Life's meaning is not something that can be found in external achievements or in the validation of others. It is found in the internal journey of self-discovery, where we confront our shadow, embrace our darkness, and take meaningful action to live in alignment with our true selves. If you want to live a life of purpose, start by looking within. Embrace your darkness, face your fears, and take action, and watch as the doors to a deeper, more meaningful life open before you. Finding your purpose is a continuous journey of self-discovery. It requires bravery, self-acceptance, and the willingness to face your fears. Remember, it's not about achieving perfection, it's about embracing all parts of yourself and using them to create the life you truly want. Keep exploring, keep evolving, and above all, keep taking action. Your purpose is waiting for you, and it begins with the person you are right now. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below about how you are incorporating Jungian principles into your life. Stay tuned for more philosophical wisdom and self-discovery tips to help you create a meaningful and fulfilling life.